Hey guys, thanks for stopping in today. We are installing a trigger replacement kit for a Ruger AR556. I'm using the Nick Taylor trigger kit. What this trigger kit comes with is 2 springs and a new bolt for the handle. We're going to hop right into this. For starters, what you guys are going to want to do is you're going to want to remove the upper receiver from the lower receiver. To do this, there is a pin right here. If you've taken out a few times, that's going to push out real smoothly. If you haven't, it's probably not going to push out so smoothly. Push that pin out, and then you're going to pull it out from the other side. It's going to stay in there. That's going to allow the receiver to flip forward. Now the second pin you're going to want to remove is right here. Same thing on that, depending on how many times you've taken it in and out will depend on whether or not it's just going to push right out or not. Okay, that went a little bit harder as usual, but it came out. Sometimes that pin likes to hang up a little bit depending on how new the gun is. Once we're done with the upper, we're going to just set that aside. We are not using that at all for this project. So now we have our upper off, and we just have a lower here. Real quick on this, you guys may be wondering what I'm using for a stand. I am just using a vise that's clipped onto an old PMag that works really good. If you need to pop the gun off, you can just hit the release. If you need to flip it over, so save your money, try that. Alright, let's get into this trigger job. Now that we have our upper receiver and lower receiver separated, we're going to go ahead and remove this trigger. I'm going to attempt to not block your view the best I can. So there is a pin right here, and there is a pin right there. Okay, those are the 2 pins that we're going to have to remove to get this trigger out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push on this top pin right here. You want to hold this hammer because that is under tension. Okay, so that's pushed halfway through. So I'm going to hold on to the hammer, and as I pull the pin out from the other side, and that's the pin, you're going to want to set all these parts in a pile. And there is your hammer that has come out. We're going to set this aside. That spring right there is going to be one of the springs that we are changing. Next, we're going to remove this lower pin right here. Same thing, push on it. There's not much tension on this one, but it does help to kind of push your finger down here and pull the pin out. There's the pin that came out. We're going to set that aside. Both of those pins are the same size, so don't worry about getting them mixed up. I'm going to pull this out. Well, I take that back. I'm not going to pull this out yet, and there's a reason. What I'm going to pull out first, though, is I'm going to pull this piece out. Remember which way that sets in there. It's important. We're going to set that aside. Now you're going to find on this particular gun, that will not come out. That trigger will not come out, unfortunately, and the reason it won't come out is because the safety gets in the way. So next we're going to have to remove the safety, so you're going to learn how to do that in this video as well. So what we're going to do for that is we are going to take a 3/16 Allen head wrench, and underneath of the handle, up in the handle, you're going to find that there is a bolt, and I will attempt to show you that bolt just so you can see what I'm talking about. So up in there, not going to be able to see it, but up in there, there is a bolt, and this is the part that we need to be extremely careful on. There's a spring and a pin in here that are very easily lost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the Allen head up in there. I'm on that bolt right now. We're going to spin that out. Hold on to that handle. There's a spring and a pin. And that spring and pin, if you lose them, you're going to the gun store to buy new. Alright, that's loose now. So that's going to come out. I'm going to keep my hand underneath of it. Okay. That right there is the spring I'm talking about. That's going to stay in there. Set that aside. Now, This time the pin didn't fall out, but there is a pin in there that's going to prevent this. There, it just fell in my hand. I'm going to show you guys where that goes. Take that pin right there, set that aside. That is very important. If that doesn't go back in the gun does not work. Okay, so that will allow our safety to pull out now. Safety's out, set that aside. And then now that will allow the trigger to come out. There's the trigger. Note the orientation of all these springs, guys. That's how that spring goes on there. If the springs go back on wrong, the gun will not work. This little spring right here, make sure that stays in there. It shouldn't want to come out. So next we're going to get into what comes in the Taylor kit that kind of loosens things up a little bit here, and we're going to go over how to install all that. Okay, so what you're going to find in your Taylor kit is you're going to find a Allen head. That's a new screw that's going to go up into the handle. What this screw does is this has a screw inside of a screw. This screw right here is controlled by a long wrench that goes down inside of here and will adjust this screw. What that's going to do is that's going to reduce the amount of take up that you have in your trigger pull. A stock AR, as you pull that trigger, you're going to find that you're going to pull down that trigger quite a bit before it fires the gun. So let's get into the springs. What the springs do are going to reduce the trigger pull on this gun by about, I would say about 3 pounds. I don't have a trigger pull meter, but that's what people who have put it on the bench have found. Let me get you guys zoomed in here. Okay, so note the orientation of the spring. Okay, this spring right here just pops right off. Simple as that. We are not going to use it anymore. Don't get rid of it, but we're not going to use it anymore. New spring, blue spring, pops on. And if you guys were paying attention, which I wasn't, got that spring on upside down. So once again, use my own words. Note the orientation of the spring. Spring orientation is like this. Okay, pop it on. There. So lesson to be learned by myself there. If that would have been on that way, that would not have worked. Okay, so old spring here, new spring there. Orientation is the same. We are going to set that aside. Next one is the hammer spring. That hammer spring is also going to reduce the weight on the trigger pull. And have you note the orientation. Okay. Set our new spring same way this other one is, so we don't mess it up again. And we're going to pop that off. And we're going to pop our new one on. Just like that. Alright, so our new springs are installed. Everything's right. So we're going to go ahead and install these back into the trigger. If you guys want to do a polish job on the trigger, this is the time to do it. We are not doing that in this video, but there are a ton of videos. This is actually stock, but there are a ton of videos on what to polish and where to polish to make the trigger pull a little bit smoother. So let's go ahead and get all this stuff installed back in the gun and see what progress we've made, and let's also install this take-up screw, and I'm going to show you guys how to adjust that. Alright guys, we are going to go ahead and drop our trigger back in, get this reassembled. So first we're going to put the trigger in. That's just going to sit down in there, make sure your springs stay on. Okay, that is back in, and the next thing we are going to do is install this piece, and orientation is as such. That sits down in there. Now note that little hole right there. That hole has to line up with the other holes for that pin to go through. Okay, so now we're going to take one of our pins that we took off earlier, and we are going to slide that pin through the side hole, and once I get this started, I will get my hand out of the way. Okay, so once that pin is in, you're going to have to take this little hammer piece right here, and you're going to have to kind of slide it back and forth until the pin sets into it. This can be a little bit of a pain, but it's definitely doable. Okay, that's pretty normal, I guess, unless you really know what you're doing. I see these springs wanting to slide out a little bit, so I'm going to just kind of assist them in getting in a little bit more. Technically, they really can't come off. So once that's in, we're going to push our pin in the rest of the way. Should probably be using a plastic hammer, but I don't have one, so I'm just going to gently. Okay, that is back in. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and install the safety back in. Safety will only go in from one side. Make sure you put it back in the same side it came out. Hold the safety in. We're going to remove this from the stand momentarily. It'll kind of rest upside down there. Okay, so now that pin that we had earlier, this pin right here, for a lot of you guys that probably just fell out and you don't have any idea where it goes, that pin goes in that hole right there. All right? So, holding your safety in with your finger, drop that pin back in. We're going to take the handle, and that handle, that spring that was in the handle, if that spring came out, that's where that goes. That's going to go right over top here and push down. Okay, now nothing, that safety cannot come back out. So at this point is whenever we're going to install this aftermarket screw that came with the kit. Okay, so what that's going to do is that screw is going to go in here, and that little take up at the end that can be adjusted is going to push up on the trigger, and that's what's going to take the slop or the pull out of the trigger. As you can see, this comes with a little bit of Loctite on it. So this is the time to take a little bit of Loctite. I'm just using the Wheeler locker that comes with my gun kit that I do all my rifles with, rifle scopes. And we're not putting a ton on there, guys. We're just going to put one little dab on there, all right? The manufacturer recommends that you do that, so make sure you do that. That's going to keep it from coming loose when it recoils, all right? So now that we have that Loctite in, let's go ahead and get this reinstalled. Alright, so that is back in. I'm just going to give it a little bit more of a turn, make sure it's tight. Okay, that's good and tight. So we have our safety back reinstalled. And next we are going to install the rest of the trigger. Alright, so we have the trigger installed. We are now going to safety's back in. The safety was locked up on me temporarily. That was because the set screw down the middle of that bolt was too tight. I'll explain that here in just a second. Alright, we're going to go ahead and put the trigger back in. So a lot of people have questions about this, so just note how I'm doing this. So there's two little tabs, and let me get back in focus here. There's a tab here and a tab here, okay? That's that bolt going through, okay? So what you're going to do, wedge those in there, go right on either side of that bolt, and then slide this forward. I'm going to try to just show you guys what I'm doing there. All right, so that's just, oops, that is back in place there. All right, that's all there is to it. Okay, so now you're going to want to take that pin that we took out earlier, and this is a bit of a tricky part here. What you're going to want to do is you push that trigger in until all of your holes are lined up on the side. Now we're just going to take that pin. Once again, a little bit of struggle getting it back out the other side. Give it a little wiggle. Okay, that pin is back in. Alright guys, so we have our trigger back installed again. We're just going to do a quick test on it, make sure everything works here. Push the hammer back. Alright, everything feels real nice there. So we have to remember that we are on the timer with the Loctite. So let's go ahead and hop into adjusting the take up in the trigger. I'm going to take this long, goofy looking Allen wrench. We're going to stick it up in here, and we are going down the center of that bolt. Sometimes this can take just a little bit to find. With that Allen wrench, I am up the center of that bolt in there. Now, what I found the easiest way to do this is to turn, and you're going to turn it just like you would any other bolt to tighten it up. Okay, make sure that safety is nice and loose, okay? Now I'm going to start taking this up here. And note that the gun is in the cocked position. Okay, so that's starting to get a little bit tighter, and you see the gun just went off there, so we went too far in that case. This is why we're doing this with a stripped gun. Okay, so this is what I wanted to note right here. So I've taken that up to the point where the gun went off, and that safety will no longer disengage. So I'm going to back that off just a little bit. Safety still won't disengage, still on fire. Back it off a bit more, still not disengaging. Okay, you see the trigger reset there. Turn a bit more. I can feel it starting to get easier, just barely turning that screw. Still not letting me go to the safe position. A little bit more. Still not letting me. Okay, there we are. I can feel that just binding just a touch, so I'm going to go a little bit more. Okay, so we're back to that safety working just perfect. I'm going to tighten it just a touch more, see if I can get a little bit more out of it. Once you go too far, you'll know, because you won't be able to flip the safety anymore. So that feels pretty good there. So I'm going to check my trigger pull again. And guys, I tell you what, that is right there. Sorry about my phone ringing there. That trigger is, if you just barely start to squeeze that trigger, you can see there is literally no take up on that at all. Feels very nice. So guys, that is how we're going to do the trigger job using the Taylor trigger kit. Taylor doesn't sponsor me or anything like that. I wish they did. But anyways, I think assembling the rest of the gun is pretty easy, so we're going to leave it there. If you guys haven't subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to subscribe, and we will see you guys on the next one.